At first, your silence feels like relief to an avoidant, and that's what confuses people. You expect them to panic immediately, to reach out, to feel the loss the same way you do. But an avoidant nervous system doesn't register separation as danger right away. It registers closeness as danger. So when you stop calling, stop texting, stop checking in, there's a short window where they can breathe. No expectations. No emotional conversation. No chance of feeling. Not enough. No risk of being asked to explain what they can't even explain to themselves. In that moment, they tell themselves they're fine, and they might even look fine. But here's what your silence really does. It removes their control over distance. Avoidants can tolerate space when they choose it. They can even enjoy it. Because chosen distance feels safe, it feels like power, it feels like protection. But distance that is chosen for them feels like abandonment. And that is where the switch happens. Because your silence isn't just space anymore. It becomes a boundary. It becomes a decision. It becomes a closed door they didn't get to leave open. And that triggers the one thing they hate admitting. They weren't just avoiding you. They were depending on the fact that you would still be there. Most avoidant patterns are built on a hidden safety net. They pull away, and the other person pulls closer. They go cold, and the other person warms the room again. They disappear emotionally, and the other person fills the silence with reassurance, explanations, care, and second chances. That dynamic isn't love, it's regulation. You were regulating the relationship for both of you. You were making connection possible while they stayed protected from it. So when you stop reaching out, you don't just remove attention. You remove the entire system that made it easy for them to stay distant without consequences. And once the system is gone, the mind starts spiraling. Because now they can't return whenever. Now they can't assume you're waiting. Now they can't keep you in the background like a tab they can open when they feel lonely. Your silence turns you from a guarantee into a question mark. And a question mark is unbearable for someone who feels safe only when they can predict the emotional landscape. They start making stories. Maybe you're busy. Maybe you're upset. Maybe you're trying to punish them. Maybe you'll come back tomorrow. And the longer you stay quiet, the weaker those stories become. Because your silence starts proving something they didn't want to face. You have a life that doesn't revolve around their mood swings. You have a self that survives without their crumbs. You have the ability to detach. That's when they begin to feel the first real sting, not love yet, not regret yet, but loss of leverage. They may not miss you in a romantic way at first. They miss the access. They miss the comfort of knowing you were available. They miss being wanted without having to show up. They miss the role you played, the one who always kept the bridge standing even when they walked away. And when that bridge isn't there, their nervous system wakes up. It shows up as restlessness, irritability, random urges to check their phone, a need to just see what you're doing, a sudden curiosity that feels almost obsessive because uncertainty creates mental loops, and mental loops create attachment. This is the moment your silence becomes loud. Because for the first time, they are forced to sit with the one experience they spend their life escaping, the emotional consequence of their own distancing. No distraction can fully cover it now, because you were the distraction. Your presence allowed them to avoid the deeper truth. Your absence confronts them with it. And the deeper truth is simple. They were comfortable as long as you were chasing, because chasing meant they were still chosen. Your silence tells them they are no longer being chosen at any cost. Your silence tells them love isn't something they can half hold, half ignore, and still keep. Your silence tells them that the version of you that tolerates inconsistency is gone. And that realization doesn't start in their heart, it starts in their control. After the first shock of your silence, the avoidant doesn't immediately become brave, they become strategic. Their mind starts trying to regain footing, not by feeling everything honestly, but by restoring control. Because control is the avoidant's comfort zone. It's how they stay safe without admitting they're scared. So once they realize you are not reaching out, they don't just wonder where you are, they wonder what it means. And that meaning is what threatens them, because meaning creates responsibility. When you used to reach out, you made the situation easy to interpret. Even if they acted distant, even if they took hours or days to respond, your effort was a constant message. We're still okay. I'm still here. You still matter. That message soothed their guilt and fed their ego at the same time. It allowed them to believe they could withdraw without losing you. Your consistency became proof that love was available on their terms. Now your silence removes that proof. And without proof, an avoidant brain fills the gap with stories. They try to rationalize your absence because rationalizing is safer than feeling. If they can explain it, they don't have to face it. So they might tell themselves you're busy, you're stressed, you're with friends, you're tired. They might even convince themselves you're being dramatic. Because labeling your boundary as drama protects them from admitting they caused the distance. But no matter what story they choose, the uncomfortable question keeps returning. What if they're done? That question hits a nerve deeper than heartbreak. It hits identity. Avoidants often build their identity around being the one who can walk away, the one who doesn't need much, the one who stays composed. Their pride is connected to emotional self-sufficiency, even if it's a mask. So when you go silent, it doesn't just feel like losing you, it feels like losing the role they've always played. Because now you are the one creating distance. You are the one who is calm. You are the one who is not reacting. And that flips the entire power dynamic. This is why your silence becomes magnetic. Not because you're playing games, but because the human mind obsesses over what it can't access. When you were available, they could postpone, delay, and withdraw without consequences. When you become unavailable, their mind starts circling you. They replay old moments, they reread messages, they remember details they ignored. They start noticing what they took for granted. And it happens quietly, internally, while outwardly they may still look unbothered. But inside something changes. Because silence doesn't give them new data. No new data means they can't regulate their anxiety. They can't check in emotionally without actually checking in. They can't confirm that you're still attached. They can't confirm that they still have access. So their nervous system begins doing what it does when a connection feels uncertain. It activates restlessness, distraction, irritability, sudden nostalgia, and a compulsive urge to peek into your world. This is where you'll see indirect behaviors. Watching your stories, liking an old post, sending something random, asking a practical question that doesn't matter. It's not confidence, it's testing. It's a temperature check that allows them to approach without risking full vulnerability. Because the avoidant fears two things at once: being too close and being fully rejected. So they try to return in a way that keeps their pride intact. They send a casual "hey," because it's safer than "I miss you." They act like nothing happened because admitting it happened would mean admitting they hurt you. They joke, they flirt, they pretend it's light, because if it stays light, they don't have to go deep. But your silence teaches them a brutal lesson: light access is no longer guaranteed. And that is the second keynote. Your silence turns the connection from always available into maybe gone. That uncertainty forces them to confront what they've been avoiding, not your emotions, but the reality that you can leave. You can detach. You can stop offering love that isn't being held properly. And when an avoidant realizes you might truly be moving on, the fear they usually avoid rises to the surface. The fear of being irrelevant, replaceable, and too late. That's the moment they stop feeling relief and start feeling consequences. The third keynote is where your silence stops being a lack of messages and becomes a mirror they can't escape. Because once the initial relief fades and the testing behaviors don't fully soothe them. The avoidant is left with something they spend their whole life trying to outrun their own emotional reality. Silence creates empty space, and empty space is dangerous for an avoidant, not because it's lonely, but because it's honest. In the quiet, they can't hide behind business, conflict, or distance. They can't blame your neediness or your emotions. They can't distract themselves with the idea that you're still there. They have to sit with the question that exposes them. What did I actually do to this person? This is when memory starts attacking their defenses. Avoidants often don't process loss in real time. In real time, they shut down, minimize, detach, and protect. But later, when your absence becomes stable, when there's no more emotional noise coming from you, their brain begins replaying moments with a clarity that is painful. They remember the times you reached out gently, the times you tried to repair, the nights you swallowed your feelings just to keep peace, the way you compromised, understood, waited, forgave. And what hits them isn't just that you cared. It's that you cared consistently, and they didn't match it. This is where their inner conflict sharpens. Because the avoidant isn't a villain in their own mind. They need to believe they're good, reasonable, and justified. So when your silence forces them to face the gap between how they see themselves and how they treated you, their nervous system reacts with shame. Not the soft kind of shame that leads to growth, but the sharp kind that makes people defensive. That's why, in this phase, you might sense emotional turbulence even if they don't speak. One day they feel nostalgic, the next they feel irritated. One moment they miss you, the next they convince themselves you were too much. That flip isn't because you changed. It's because shame is unbearable, and their mind is trying to escape it. So they do what avoidant minds do best. They split the story. They either idealize you, maybe I lost the best thing I'll ever have, or they devalue you, maybe I'm better off without that pressure. Both are strategies to avoid one terrifying truth. I had someone real, and I didn't know how to hold it. Because holding it would require accountability, vulnerability, and emotional risk, the very things they train themselves to avoid. But silence keeps pressing the same point: you are not there to rescue them from their own consequences. When you used to reach out, you gave them an escape hatch. Even if they felt guilty, your message softened it. Even if they felt like they failed, your love covered it. Even if they shut down, you reopened connection for them. That made it possible for them to stay emotionally immature without fully losing you. Your silence removes the escape hatch, and now the guilt doesn't get resolved. It sits, it grows, it starts whispering, maybe I really did ruin it. And here's what happens next: they start grieving. But they don't call it grief. They call it boredom. They call it emptiness. They call it, nothing feels exciting. They call it, I can't focus. They might throw themselves into work, friends, entertainment, anything to avoid feeling the weight of your absence. But the absence keeps showing up, because what they miss is not just your presence, it's what your presence did for them. You were a source of warmth, grounding, emotional security, and meaning, even if they pretended they didn't need it. This is the phase where they realize something humbling: your love was doing more work than they acknowledged. And the most destabilizing part is this: your silence changes how they see themselves. If you can detach, if you can stop begging, if you can stop trying, then they can no longer define themselves as the strong one. Because real strength isn't withdrawal. Real strength is emotional presence. And your silence forces them to confront that their independence might actually be fear. So the third keynote is the mirror effect. Your silence exposes the emotional debt they built up while you kept paying the relationship's cost. And once an avoidant sees that debt clearly, they either run harder from it, or they finally feel the pain they avoided for years. Either way, your silence becomes the moment they can't blame you anymore, because you aren't doing anything. You're simply gone. and that absence makes their truth louder than any argument ever could. When your silence stays consistent, the avoidant reaches a breaking point where they have to choose between pride and connection. And that choice is not romantic at first, it's psychological. Because by now they've realized you're not doing what you used to do. You're not chasing. You're not explaining. You're not reopening the door after they closed it. And that forces a new kind of panic, not loud panic, but controlled panic. The kind that looks calm on the outside, while the inside starts calculating. How do I get access back without losing face? This is where the comeback attempts begin, and they rarely start with vulnerability. An avoidant who is truly afraid of intimacy will not walk up and say, "I miss you, I'm sorry I was wrong." That would mean stepping into emotional exposure, and exposure feels like danger to them. So they approach sideways. They send something random. They create a small excuse. They test the waters with a casual message that gives them plausible deniability. If you respond warmly, they feel relief. If you don't, they tell themselves you're mean or dramatic, because that story protects them from the shame of being rejected. Understand this clearly: many avoidants don't return to love first. They return to control. Because control is what they lost when you stopped reaching out. Before, they could pull away and still keep you orbiting. Now they can't. So the first goal becomes restoring influence. That's why you might see confusing behavior, breadcrumbs, mixed signals, just checking in, or sudden interest that disappears again the moment you respond. It's not always manipulation in an evil sense. It's a nervous system strategy. They are trying to calm their anxiety without actually doing the hard work of emotional repair. And the moment you don't give them the old access, something deeper gets triggered: shame. Shame is the avoidance hidden wound. Not sadness, not heartbreak. Shame. Shame says, "I failed." Shame says, "I wasn't enough." Shame says, "I hurt someone who loved me." And shame is unbearable for someone who has built a lifetime identity around being fine. So instead of moving through shame, they often defend against it. They may act cold again. They may blame you. They may suddenly rewrite history, acting like you were the problem all along. They may act like they're the victim because you changed. But you didn't change. You stopped performing emotional labor for someone who kept avoiding responsibility. This keynote is about the avoidance ego collision. Because silence doesn't argue. Silence doesn't beg. Silence doesn't explain. Silence doesn't give them a debate to win. And when they can't win a debate, they're left with the only thing that can't be controlled: truth. If you're still silent, it means you're not impressed by their half effort. It means their charm, their distance, their withdrawal, their sudden reappearance, none of it is enough to reset you. And that hits their ego in a place they didn't expect. So they escalate. Sometimes they escalate by getting sweeter, suddenly attentive, suddenly consistent, suddenly different. Sometimes they escalate by getting sharper, passive-aggressive, guilt-trippy, implying you're heartless for not responding. Sometimes they escalate by using a crisis, because emergencies create instant connection. The pattern is the same. They're trying to pull you back into the old cycle, where you prove your love and they stay protected. But your silence is not a punishment. It's a boundary with teeth. And this is the moment they start realizing a painful rule of life. You can't keep someone loyal with uncertainty forever. You can't keep someone devoted with inconsistency forever. You can't keep someone emotionally available while you stay emotionally unavailable. Your silence exposes that their old strategy only worked because you tolerated it. Now they face a new reality. If they want you, they have to risk something. They have to risk humility. They have to risk being seen. They have to risk an honest apology. They have to risk being the one who reaches out without knowing if you'll respond. And that is terrifying to them, because it puts them in the position you were in the whole time, hoping, waiting, wondering, trying. This is where you see the split between avoidants who grow and avoidants who repeat. The ones who grow stop testing and start owning. They stop sending A and start saying, "I know I hurt you." They stop acting casual and start being real. The ones who repeat will keep circling, keeping it vague, keeping it light, keeping it safe, because they want the comfort of you without the responsibility of you. And your silence teaches the final lesson of this. Keynote access to you is no longer free, because your peace is no longer negotiable. The fifth keynote is the most important one, because it's where the avoidant finally understands what your silence really is. Not a tactic, not a mood, not a temporary phase. It becomes a new version of you that they can't bargain with. And for an avoidant, that is the most destabilizing realization of all. You are no longer emotionally available on autopilot. You are no longer the person who stays open while they stay protected. You have stopped being a safe place they can enter and exit without consequence. At this stage, they don't just miss your messages. They miss the old power dynamic. They miss the version of you that tried harder than them. The version of you that explained your feelings gently so they wouldn't feel cornered. The version of you that accepted crumbs and called it progress. The version of you that forgave quickly because you believed in their potential. That version of you was convenient, not because you were weak, but because you were loving. And your love made it easy for them to delay growth. Now your silence removes that convenience, and they are left facing a painful truth. Love with you requires maturity, and they may not have it. This is where the avoidant starts to feel real regret, but it doesn't always show up as tears. It shows up as an identity crisis. Because if you can detach, if you can stay calm, if you can truly stop reaching out, then your value shifts in their mind. You stop being the one who will always be there. You become the one I might never get back. And that might is torture for an avoidant because it exposes their deepest fear being too late. They start doing mental comparisons. They start imagining you with someone else. They start realizing that the traits they found, too emotional, are exactly what makes someone a good partner. They start remembering your loyalty as something rare, not something guaranteed. They start recognizing that you didn't just love them, you chose them again and again, even when they made it hard. And now they see that choice was not infinite. This is the moment they realize silence can be final. And it forces a clarity they've avoided for a long time. They either rise to the level of connection, or they lose it. But here's the brutal part. An avoidant can feel this clarity and still fail to act correctly. Because regret is not the same as repair. Missing you is not the same as changing. Wanting you back is not the same as being able to sustain intimacy without sabotaging it. So in this keynote, the avoidance realization becomes a fork in the road. One path leads to growth, accountability, and emotional courage. The other leads to repeating the cycle with someone else, because repeating is easier than transforming. If they choose growth, they stop trying to win you back with small signals and start showing up with consistency. They stop protecting their image and start protecting the relationship. They stop needing you to be the one who makes it okay, and they take responsibility for the damage. They accept that your trust isn't returned through words, but through behavior over time. They become willing to be uncomfortable, because discomfort is the price of real intimacy. If they choose the old pattern, they will try to convert your silence into guilt. They may say you're cold. They may say you changed. They may imply you're punishing them. They may try to trigger your empathy, because empathy was always the doorway back to access. They may throw nostalgia at you, memories, sweetness, reminders of the good times, because it's safer to romanticize the past than to confront the harm they caused. They may even show effort for a short burst, then pull away again, because they want the relief of your return, not the responsibility of sustained closeness. And this is where your silence becomes your power, not because it hurts them, but because it heals you. Because the real message of your silence is not, "Look what you did." The real message is, "I no longer abandon myself to keep you comfortable." That is what an avoidant realizes when you never reach out again. They realize you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were asking for emotional honesty. You were asking for a love that doesn't require you to shrink. And by staying silent, you prove you finally mean it. You prove you can walk away from half love. You prove you can live without the chaos. You prove you can choose peace over potential. And that changes everything. Because once you become that person, the avoidant can't come back to the old you. They have to meet the new you. They have to bring a new level of maturity, or they will feel your silence as a door that doesn't reopen. And the deepest regret they carry isn't just losing you. It's realizing you would have stayed if they had simply learned how to love you properly.